So I was watching NBA on TNT the other night, and I saw Shaquille O'Neal make a comment about Donovan Mitchell and Russell Westbrook. So for those who have not been following this one, over the last few weeks, Shaq has went out of his way to call out Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and the Utah Jazz. He obviously is not a fan of Rudy Gobert being a $200 million guy, and obviously he doesn't average the most points out there. And I wouldn't consider Gobert one of the top 5 big men in the league. I will give Gobert this amount of credit. He is very reliable, and he's really good on defense, and he gives a lot of effort night in, night out. I will give him that. But obviously, you got to understand a guy like Shaquille O'Neal, one of the greatest centers of all time. Many say he is the greatest of all time, or at least the most dominant. Why he could look around and be like, yo, y'all giving $200 million for that? Nowadays, obviously, Shaq helped build the sport that helped guys like Gobert get those type of contracts. I get it. What I didn't understand is the criticism in the direction of Donovan Mitchell. I was actually watching the broadcast in which Shaq, Chuck, Kenny, and the crew were talking about Donovan Mitchell. And it's all started because they brought up how Donovan Mitchell had only had either 10 assists or 10 rebounds in a game like twice in his career. And they just kind of went from there, right? I was watching and I was like, all right, I get it. It is something, but to just make the case that these guys have made, especially with the season that the Utah Jazz have gotten off to, they pretty much been tit for tat, number 1 or number 2, give or take. The Clippers or the Lakers have been 1 or 2 in the Western Conference since the season has started. They're off to a great start right now. This is the year you want to criticize Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz? Okay, it was odd, but I was like, all right, I get it. Shaq ain't the biggest fan of Gobert. He's looking at Mitchell. And I'm pretty confident he sees a little bit of D Wade in Mitchell, but he doesn't see any Gobert, or he didn't see any Shaq in Gobert, right? Does that make sense? Okay. So a post-game interview happens after the Jazz win another game, in which Shaq says, I don't believe you can take your game to the next level. That's what he tells Mitchell. I'm summarizing there, right? And Mitchell responds by saying, okay. And I hate those type of first off, he didn't even ask a question. Right? He didn't even ask a question. I hate those type of scenarios because what do you want Donovan Mitchell to say? You really want this man to curse you out on national TV and get fined. That's what you really want him to do. That's what you're looking for, right? But again, these athletes got the ultimate respect for guys like for guys like Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley. So more times than not, they keep it cordial. Now, honest to God, I truth think Shaq and Chuck, they got a lot of these dudes scared. Let's keep in mind, they're in that grown man stripped age. I know Chuck's got some weight on him, but typically, younger men have respect for men in their 40s and 50s because they're in that grown man strip space. Y'all know what I'm talking about, all right? So Mitchell keeps it cordial. He's like, okay, I've been doubted all my life. That's it on that. Fast forward, this week, Shaquille O'Neal had the audacity to say that today, not talking about careers, today, he thinks Russell Westbrook is a better player than Donovan Mitchell. So, yeah, I want to give credit to Candace Parker. She immediately called out Shaq for this ridiculous take. Dwayne Wade ain't say much. But shout out to my Vol for Life, Candace Parker. She wasn't going for it. She immediately pushed back at Shaq. And you could feel the tension on the set. I love that. So I want to be respectful to the legend Shaq and tell you guys where I think he's coming from, though I do not speak for the great Shaquille O'Neal. You got to think. Because we've heard Michael Jordan come out and say Russell Westbrook's one of his favorite players. We've heard Kobe come out and say Russ is one of his favorite players. God rest his dad and the late, great Kobe Bryant. Russ has been a favorite of a lot of athletes of the past. Why is that so? Because say what you want about Russell Westbrook, you ain't going to find somebody that goes out and competes harder than Westbrook night in, night out. But my problem with some of these old timers, and we're talking about legends, we're talking about Shaq, Kobe, and Michael. It don't get any greater than that. My problem with some of these former athletes is though they're very appreciative and complimentary to Russell Westbrook's go hard every second of the game of basketball, they never acknowledge the faults that Russell Westbrook clearly has. Every team he's on at this point, they're guaranteed either to not make the playoffs or to be a first-round exit. Now, I know the Rockets got to the second round, but damn, it took them literally facing off against the OKC Thunder with just Chris Paul and a bunch of young guys to get to the second round. And even that, they barely got there. It took them 7 games to get through that series. Whatever. So for me, when I watch Russell Westbrook, I see the things that Shaq, Mike, and Kobe likely saw. The go-hard competitive nature. But I, somebody that didn't play the game of basketball at an elite level, also understand the traits of the human traits that have to exist on the court. Chemistry, right? And I feel like Shaq and these guys, they don't acknowledge how if you go out and take bad shot after bad shot, how that affects a team's defense. How the way Russell Westbrook is kind of a me first, me second type of guy, how that maybe can work for a 7-foot Shaquille O'Neal or a 6'6 Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or a 6'4, 6'5 Penny Hardaway or a 6'3, 6'4 all-time great in Dwayne Wade as well. How it could work for some of those guys, but it doesn't work for a 6'2, 6'3, probably outside of his prime athletically, never been a consistent jump shooter, Russell Westbrook. I don't see how these guys don't acknowledge the faults in Westbrook's game. They just ignore the fact that seemingly everywhere Westbrook goes, the other star player next to him opts for a trade. A la Kevin Durant, a la Paul George, a la James Harden, who I do believe deserved fault in that Rocket situation. But now also Bradley Beal. Though I don't think Bradley Beal has demanded a trade out of Washington, he is clearly frustrated as a Wizard. But they don't bring that up. So for Shaq to go on those television airwaves and say Russell Westbrook is better today than Donovan Mitchell, I don't get it. I think it's ridiculous. And I think it speaks to a bunch of former athletes who, quite frankly, as great as they are, sometimes it baffles me that they were the players that they were. That's how you know these dudes were just physically dominating. Because when you listen to Shaq and Chuck talk a lot of times, you're like, damn, with that insight, with that brain, you were able to be one of the greatest players of your generation. Your absolute knowledge of the game doesn't make a lot of sense to me. When I listen to guys like Draymond Green, those are the guys that I'm fascinated with, and I want to see them cover the game of basketball night in, night out. When I'm watching the NFL and I'm watching a CBS broadcast and I'm listening to Tony Romo, he's a guy that makes me want to cut my television up, not cut that bad boy down. So when, Shaq made a comment like that, it automatically brought me back to a couple weeks ago when I saw LeBron and Kevin Durant hop into a comment section, and they both spoke on how they thought a lot of former players were jealous of their success. And I'm assuming the rags and, the riches that these guys are able to make nowadays being an NBA player of today versus of old. Right? Both Kevin Durant and LeBron James spoke on that. And I have to be honest with you guys. Listening to Shaq say Westbrook's better than Mitchell, instead of taking up for LeBron or KD, I'm going to tell them straight up and down. That's what y'all get. I know this video is taking a turn for the left, but just rock out with me for a couple of minutes. That's what y'all get. You see, I went to school at the University of Tennessee, studied in sports journalism, had understand what I'm about to say. I had 8 internships in conjunction with news stations as well. I worked at ESPN, every local news station in the city of Knoxville, Tennessee. I worked there, had other internships. I worked my behind off to get where I'm at today, to be on this camera, to have the knowledge at my young age of now 27, to make a living for myself, right? And I'm still only getting better. But for so many years, I've heard these athletes say, you don't know what you're talking about. You didn't play. I even had it come my way when I was covering volunteer football and basketball. I had a couple athletes say it's just different when you play the game, bruh. You don't know what you're talking about. I took it on the chin. I said, you're right. You're the expert. But what happens when the expert gives ridiculous commentary, a ridiculous perspective? And I think Shaquille O'Neal saying Russell Westbrook is better than Donovan Mitchell today is a ridiculous perspective. But I'm not surprised, and I'm not coming to the defense of Donovan Mitchell today. For so long, you athletes have told us, reporters, journalists, whatever you want to call us, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. Just cover the game, write your story, do your video, and shut up. Don't act like you're an expert of this because you don't know what it's like to travel on the road night to night. You don't know what it's like to battle with a guy when you're tired. I've always acknowledged you're right. I try to give the utmost praise and admiration to athletes of today and yesterday as well. But with that being said, I have to be honest. Y'all wanted athletes in these positions. And what you saw with Donovan Mitchell a couple weeks ago and Shaquille O'Neal during that TNT broadcast, and what Shaq said about Donovan Mitchell earlier this week not being better than Russell Westbrook in 2021 is the product of putting more athletes in positions that journalists used to take. People that actually watch the game night in, night out. I'm not talking about former journalists like Rob Parker and Chris Broussard. I'm talking about guys that live it today. The guy rested dead, Sekou Smith, who was over at the NBA doing a phenomenal job. Woj of ESPN, Zach Lowe. I know they're kind of nerdy, but they watch the game. They breathe the game of basketball night in, night out. The Mark Schlers of the world, the Ryan Clarks of the world. I'm talking about guys that breathed their whatever sport they're talking about, sometimes multiple sports. I'm talking about guys that actually breathe it. And I know Ryan Clark's a former athlete. I give him the utmost respect and admiration because you can tell he actually studies the film. And there are a lot of guys that I'm leaving out of that conversation that actually do their homework. Y'all wanted more of the athletes to take these roles versus journalists. I'll even give Nick Wright a little credit. Say what you want about him, but he always comes prepared, and I always can tell he was right there next to me in spirit watching the game. Right? Always comes prepared. I might not agree with a lot of what he says. Always comes prepared. When I hear Shaquille O'Neal say Westbrook's better than Donovan Mitchell, I think I was listening to Shaquille O'Neal interview Christian Wood after the Rockets won a couple of days ago. And Christian Wood called, what was the word that he used to describe Shaq? He called him a casual. And I tend to agree with that. If you think as many businesses as Shaq got, he's watching the game of basketball night in, night out, you're out your damn mind. If you think Charles Barkley is sitting around watching games night in, night out versus gambling, golfing, and all the other things that his riches have afforded him to do, you out your damn mind. That is the reality of the situation. But LeBron, KD, Donovan Mitchell, y'all complained about journalists being in these positions of power, and I actually think there should be a balance. I think you can have journalists, and I think you can have former athletes both in those roles. And I'm not the guy saying athletes don't deserve podcasts and all that. I'm not saying shut up and dribble. I'm not saying show up and throw the ball and catch the ball. That's not what I'm saying. But here is the product of putting maybe the wrong athletes in those positions just because they draw ratings. Again, if you're asking me, is Shaq and Chuck entertaining? Absolutely. Are you asking me, are they the athletes that breathe the game of basketball? I can't go there with you. I can't do that with you.